At a time when intra-continental trade is adjudged weak, Africa's most influential leaders gather to bring to the fore burning issues to address in order to make African economic integration a reality. The goal is to make the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area (CIFTA) a driver for private sector growth, the backbone of a growing economy. Since 2012, Africa's CEO Forum has gathered over 1,500 African and international business leaders each year to explore and set Africa's business agenda. The 7th edition of the Africa CEO Forum moves to Kigali, the Rwandan capital, with the theme Open Africa, from continental treaties to business realities. This briefing expounds on the theme of the event. The president and the founder of the Africa CEO Forum, Mr. Amir Ben Yahmed, says the theme is apt with the historic signing of the agreement for the creation of the Continental Free Trade Area in Kigali in March 2018.
This conference is being held with the backdrop of economic integration, and we are very proud and very happy that this conference is the first private sector conference that happens right after or on the verge of the CFTA, who is about to come into force, I hope, in the next days and weeks. And the theme of this conference is try to put the private sector in the middle of this conversation. Up until now, it has been a political will. Private sector leaders have not been really associated, and the principle, the main focus of this conference will be to put the private sector at the forefront of this discussion. And we have been working very hard with the IFC to try to identify the themes that were very important for the next steps after the fact that the CFTA will come into force. I want to thank again IFC for the great work that they're doing with the private sector in Africa, and that the great work that they have done with us in preparing this conference.
A long negotiation phase is now underway with the aim of eliminating customs tariff, but greater change is needed if this initiative is to succeed. The forum is to get the private sector to chart the new course for African economic integration.
The forum for us is a very important event, and as you said, Amir, a very timely one this year when we look at what's happening in the continent in terms of regional integration. And I will say a few words around what's happening seen from our side on the trade scene. We see the trade agreement that was signed here really a major, very ambitious step in terms of creating what could be potentially the largest market for goods and services in the world. We all know that it is an ambitious agreement, and that it will take some time to get all the effects that it can have. But as soon as it gets effective, and that hopefully will be very soon, it will have immediate impacts on the economies of the region. And this is a very positive movement in terms of when we look at the fragmentation of the economies in Africa, the fact that many countries are landlocked, that many countries are of a relatively small size. Having a larger market will create a lot of opportunities for businesses. It will create opportunities for economic activity, for trade, and for integration.
Over 1,800 delegates arrived for the 2019 edition of the Africa CEO Forum. Business leaders come to grips with key topics bordering on the mobilization of the private sector around cross-border infrastructure and logistical projects, lessons to grab from the East African Community regional trade model, explore other major challenges for the development of Africa's private sector, the growth potential of Africa's tourism, among others.
These past few months, much has been said and written about the benefits of a more integrated Africa.
more growth, more trade, more jobs. But not enough has been said about the threat of not fully embracing it. Globalization is clearly slowing down. Trade intensity, foreign direct investment are all decreasing. Robotics is lowering the incentive to shift production to our countries. Advanced economies are increasing their investment in services, and services are harder to trade and harder to offshore to our economies. And last but not least, China, USA, and Europe are on the verge of a trade war. So Africa can draw three main conclusions from this. First, catching up by following traditional industrialization policy is going to be more difficult. Second, countries need to put premium on education and invest in the knowledge economy. And third, our topic, economic integration, is not a necessity. It's not an opportunity, it's a vital necessity. And it's a necessity for all of us in this room, government and CEOs. And that's why we chose this title and this theme for this year's conference. It's a little reminder that building African integration cannot happen without you in the room. The African private sector and the international investor. So our ambition for this conference is to kickstart a global conversation between public and private sectors on how to move forward together. And this ambition has to extend to the people who are not in this room, the worker, the citizen, the civil society. Because none of our action will make sense if we don't make a priority to take care of our environment, make sure we share equally the benefits of growth, and to create opportunities for all. Be confident that the Africa CEO Forum will make sure that this conversation happens and that you, business leaders, are given a greater role. Because putting you at the forefront of economic transformation is what the CEO Forum stands for.
Africa needs 1.7 million new jobs every month. 1.7 million every month. How do you create that? It's possible good jobs in the formal sector. We can create 1.7 million new civil servants every month. Not in the cards. The only way to do it is really to develop a thriving and competitive private sector enabled by free trade opportunities across the continent. To do that, we need both visionaries who can imagine new markets that will be profitable, and at the same time pragmatists who knows how to make these markets a reality. So, to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, if not the CEO Forum, who, and if not now, when?
The choice of Rwanda as the host country for this year's forum is not far-fetched, as the country has been identified as the fastest-growing economy on the continent after years of backwardness during the deadly genocide that turned against the country's growth and development. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame speaks.
This is the right time for private sector leaders to reflect on what needs to be changed and improved on their end as well, so that we have a situation where, be it the private sector or public sector, we challenge one another, we push one another to make more progress. The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, especially at a national level, will require constant dialogue and flexibility. The full involvement of the African business community is critical to keep us on track. In less than a generation, it is projected that Africa will have the world's biggest workforce. I'm sure you have heard this many times. That means 1.1 billion working-age Africans, which is more than China or India. We don't have any time to waste to do what is necessary so that this statistic becomes Africa's greatest asset rather than a burden for our continent and the world. It is our responsibility to ensure that deeper integration translates into prosperity and well-being for Africa's people. For one thing, half of those 1 billion people will be women. So, long as women face unnecessary obstacles in using their talent to the full, we are all going to continue paying a heavy price in terms of lost wealth.
It is a very large and massive.
The opening ceremony over, business leaders break into some 40-panel discussions.
Gives the framework, but not the details of what should be done. We need to have...
No doubt, the Continental Free Trade Area, CIFTA, is a talking point. CIFTA aims to set out powerful tools to foster growth, employment, and industrialization. One of the panels has the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, on it.
But CFTA is there so that those areas and people where things have worked, it's continued progress. Now, so we shouldn't hold on to the CFTA and say it won't work just because something else has not worked, because it has worked in some places and for some people. Continue forward so that for those it is not working, we can also, or they can also be brought on board, and they need to attend to some of those things affecting them so that they realize the benefits that are there to be realized. So I think we don't expect to put a mechanism or something in place and just expect it to work. No, it needs an effort. People will have to do or to undertake certain things so that things work for them. What is not being questioned here is the benefit of those other organizations, whether they are sub-regional or otherwise, or the CFTA. There is no question. Nobody is saying that this is not the right way to go. Nobody is saying that this is not going to give us benefits. Actually, it is the only way to go if you want to maximize on the benefits and opportunities and for the development of our continent. So we just have to make it work. And we know how to make it work. But we are also aware of the challenges that have to be dealt with.
There's got to be political will as well, right? And that's really important.
Political will is in everything. Yes, Carlos mentioned a while ago about technical aspects of doing things. This is real, this is a must. But political will allows things that must work to work. This is the whole thing.
With CIFTA now in force, the need to consider some stumbling blocks and way to tackle same comes to the front burner.
And as we all know, less than 25% of Africans actually travel to other parts of Africa. So free movement of people is very, very important. And as far as I know, there are only 2 countries in Africa, Seychelles and Rwanda now, that have free access, to all Africans. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your vision and leadership. So we actually need, to have this. It is a very important thing. However, the structure as it is really does not favor some countries in Africa, like Nigeria, which has not signed. And that is because I believe of the huge population and also the, high dependence on imports. Nigeria has not signed, although I'm not talking on behalf of the government of Nigeria, but I would say this because I know Mr. President has set up a committee, to look into this. And one of the issues is that there is a regional economic bloc agreement in West Africa, which is the ETLS, ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, which has been in effect for quite some time.
In our history, we belong to many economic groupings, but in some areas we were there, but not fully there. So compliance with some rules and so on has been very difficult. But we have also understood that there is no other alternative than integration. It's not only with the CFTA.
Right now, we have basically 50% more costs in doing trade in Africa than we do in East Asia. And to change that, we'll have to be able to really have more than just political will. We need a lot of technicality too.